We are coming to the end of our first day, and we have a speaker from FEMA. Victoria Salinas is joining us. I think she's on with us, Laura, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, there we go.
I'm here.
Victoria, nice to meet you. We haven't met before, so I'm
nice to meet you, Tom.
Very glad that you're able to join us. So for those who don't know, Victoria currently serves at FEMA as the Associate Administrator for Resilience. FEMA Resilience aims to help communities across the United States equitably adapt, survive, and recover and thrive in the face of natural disasters, climate change, and security threats, and so forth. She's here to talk today about cultivating inclusive partnerships, and certainly a relevant topic for all of us here. So Victoria, welcome. Glad you're able to join us today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to join you all, Tom. And good evening to those of you on the East Coast. I'm really thrilled to be here. And it's such an important convening that you all are having in terms of really understanding all the initiatives that have been going on, how people are partnering together. I appreciated just as you were saying, the real talk in the last session about how hard the work we are all trying to do together truly is and the personal toll it takes on us. And just a little bit of background on myself too. I've been back at FEMA for several months in my new role, but was here post Katrina for many years, and then have done a lot of work with state and local governments on resilience and addressing a whole range of issues. So really pleased to be here. One of the things I just wanted to kick off by saying is that this consortium is such a wonderful forum for bringing together so many diverse perspectives across the whole community. And that's truly, those cross-sector solutions are truly what are going to be needed as we try and build our nation's resilience. And as I mentioned, here in Resilience, we are very much focused on equitably helping communities adapt, survive, and thrive in the face of natural disasters, in climate change and security threats. It's really the whole of that all hazards look. But one of the key things when it comes to building resilience is the partnerships. That is at the core of how we come together, the public, private, and community-based actors to serve communities, to really advance things. And this whole community approach is so much more than an investment in physical infrastructure and physical property. As you all have been talking about even just recently, it's about fostering a mentality change across our country, that resilience starts with individuals. You talked about it in the last panel, and mental health. It's about our families, it's about our communities, it's about the broader nation. And that is a mindset shift in many ways as we think about how do we go about reducing not just the physical impacts of disasters, but we really work together to avoid the societal impact, reducing the human suffering that the range of events we face create for people. Nowhere is this more important than at the community level. And this is a theme I think you'll hear in my remarks today. The public-private partnerships at that community level are where we see the lasting impact of our partnerships. And there's really no better time to make new connections and take these partnerships to a new level than now. The pandemic opened many people's eyes to the importance of working together, of the way that events can affect every facet of our daily lives. And so there is an openness at this moment in time to drive partnerships to a whole new place. Today, particularly, I'm excited to share with you some of what is in FEMA's new strategic plan. Part of partnering together is knowing what we're all trying to do, and then trying to figure out where our points of intersection are, where we can leverage each other's strengths. And so my hope today is that I can share with you some of the things we're setting out to do in these next 5 years in our new strategic plan, and highlight some of the resources and tools that we have on offer as we really chart this path forward. And so one of the things that I think we're all feeling is that in these next 5 years, in the years ahead, now more than ever, we at FEMA are feeling that emergency managers are being called on to do more than ever before. We recognize that the expectations are growing and they will continue to grow in these coming years. both because of what we've recently experienced with pandemic, but also because of the impacts of climate change and how we're seeing the impacts really cascade across communities in our nation. Many of you may have read NOAA's recent report on billion-dollar disasters, where in 2021 alone, there were 20 weather-related disasters with losses that had $1 billion each in the United States. When we compare that to even the 1980s to the 2020s, that's where we had 7.4 events per year generally in that time stretch. And so there's a huge increase currently and expected in the years to come, which means that the communities we're all serving are going to need that additional assistance to weather these storms. To further put things in perspective, the average number of major declarations issued from 1960 to 1969, 18 per year. So we think back in time, there was 18 big events per year that had declarations. In 2021, and FEMA responded to 104 major disaster declarations in 2020 and in 2021. That is a lot of disaster declarations, a lot of communities feeling that their capacity to respond and take care of their own is exceeded. And we know that not all of the events that we respond to at FEMA it's not the end of all of the events. There are plenty of things happening every day that do not rise to that level of needing federal assistance. For emergency managers at all levels, answering this call is going to require setting out new ways of doing things together. In our new strategic plan, we did a lot of listening as we went into this to really understand and talk with stakeholders and partners and really listen to what are the key things that you all see and are experiencing that need better focus, better attention. And so in our new 2022 to 2026 strategic plan, there's a bold vision in there and 3 very ambitious goals that we are setting out to accomplish, but will require cross-sector partnership. And these goals are ones that in the conversations we've had and the stakeholder engagement we had with states, local governments, tribal nations, territorial governments, NGOs, private sector, there are certain themes running through these conversations that the new strategic plan and our direction for the next 5 years seeks to address. And in every single goal that I'm about to share with you, there is a key first element, one that you touched on even in the last session, and it's our people. All of us, regardless of which organization we're helping lead or we're part of, our people are what makes and breaks our ability to do anything in this world. And so the first objective in every single goal we have for the next 5 years is our people and investing in people. Those goals are the following. First, it's instilling equity as the foundation in emergency management. Second is leading a whole community in climate resilience. And third, it's promoting and sustaining a ready FEMA and a prepared nation. Instilling equity as a foundation in emergency management is critical to actually accomplishing our mission of helping people before, during, and after disasters at FEMA. And I know many of you know this already, but the concept of, I just wanted to start with truly differentiating the difference between equity and equality. Equality, we all know as trying to make sure people have the same access to things. Equity is really trying to ensure that people have what they need to have a positive outcome. And I'll give you an example. I was most recently from California, in Oakland. And in California, there's a big focus on being self-sufficient for 72 hours after the big one and being able to prepare. In East Oakland, and in some of the communities and Oakland is one of those communities like many where there's major life expectancy differentials, whether you live in the hills of Oakland or the flats of Oakland. It's one of those, like many American cities with these types of inequalities and inequities. And to prepare for 72 hours looks very different if you're in East Oakland or you're in the Berkeley Hills. And so as we think about instilling equity in emergency management, it's truly understanding the needs of people so that regardless of where you're at, what neighborhood you're in, what the history of your community is, the barriers you've faced, you are supported in the right way for you to reach that condition of well-being, which in this case, in my example, was 72 hours of being self-sufficient for 72 hours. So that really is one of the big things that I see as very different when we're talking about equality versus equity. And at FEMA, we very much adopted the president's definition of equity, which in many ways is a very useful tool as we look to instill equity as a foundation for emergency management. It defines equity as the consistent and systematic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who belong to underserved communities and that have been denied such treatment. It goes on to be very specific because we understand that different groups of people have different needs. It includes lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, gender nonconforming, non-binary, persons who face discrimination based on pregnancy-related conditions, parents, caregivers, first-generation professionals. There's a whole range of different types of identities and experiences in this country that require us to really embrace what instilling equity calls on us to do. The Stafford Act, equity in many ways is not a new concept for emergency management. The Stafford Act requires us to deliver support without discrimination based on race, color, religion, nationality, et cetera. But a community's history, its culture, its racial composition, its economic status, all of these things influence their ability to access federal resources. And so one of the key things in our new strategic plan is truly taking a people first approach, both with our staff, but with the people that we serve. And this will look, as we move forward, we are putting in the center the understanding that historically underserved communities experience differences in preparedness and mitigation, and how they're able to address both the chronic stresses of daily life and the major shocks that are caused by disasters. And so it is imperative that we direct our resources and routinely look at our programs and policies to eliminate these disparities. One of the things that we admit and we see is that we have often fallen short as a federal government as a whole. For example, we heard loud and clear, both in the consultations that we've done and our request for information around equity and climate resilience, that the barriers that are being experienced by underserved populations are great in terms of whether it's before disasters or even after disasters when it comes to individual assistance for disaster survivors. So I want to share just a few things we've already done in this space and a few things we're looking to do in the year to go, just to really help bring into perspective what this can mean and how transformative this equity lens can be for emergency management as a field as we look deep. So this past year, one of the things I'm particularly excited about, given my work in Louisiana and a lot of underserved communities, is that when you were a homeowner and you had your home affected by an event and you were trying to apply for FEMA assistance before, you had to show proof of home ownership, and that meant a deed. What we came to realize is in places as different as Detroit and Louisiana, that home ownership and how you prove it looks different sometimes. There are a lot of people in our nation excluded from the legal system that gave deeds. There are a lot of people that inherited their homes but didn't have that piece of paper that then unlocked federal funds to help you rebuild. And so over the past year, FEMA's revamped the way you can show that you own your home and expanded that to include a whole range of different ways of proving home ownership. These changes have increased already the number of people who are accessing our individual assistance program to help rebuild their homes. And this focus on equity is going to lead to a lot more changes in the way we do our programs, the way we do our work, the way we serve communities. And key to this effort is assessing our programs through an equity lens. And the Biden administration already called on many of our programs and many programs around federal government to do equity assessments and really be open to understanding the systemic issues that exist in government that can impede the ability of underserved communities to access resources and benefit from federal programs. For instance, as we look to the year ahead, we recognize the burden of applying for and navigating many of the programs. If you're a high capacity community with affluence, with staff, with the ability to pay for grant writers, writing a grant application and navigating a federal grant process becomes second nature. But if you're not one of those communities with the resources available, then it's a big barrier to access the very resources that are going to help you become resilient. And so one of the things we're looking to do in this year and the years ahead is really simplify this process for the whole community, and so that we can be reducing risk in the communities that need it most. And some of those things that looks like is through our Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, providing more direct technical assistance to any community that needs it to be able to navigate this process and also develop and design high impact projects. So that's the first goal, instilling equity as a foundation for emergency management. And I'm sure your wheels are turning about things you are already doing in this space and have done in this space. Our second goal is around leading the whole community in climate resilience. Climate resilience represents a profound crisis in our nation. It's causing more frequent, more intense, and more destructive natural disasters. We see it all the time. EPA recently released an analysis that some of you may have seen around climate change and social vulnerability in the United States that focused on 6 impact sectors. And it showed something many of us intuitively recognized already, that the most severe harms from climate change fall disproportionately upon underserved communities who are least able to prepare for, recover from these events. And that's heat waves, poor air quality, flooding, other impacts. And so they looked at a whole range of types of impacts that come from events. And the findings make a lot of sense given our nation's history, even when we think about the history of redlining in this nation. Black and African-American individuals are projected, according to this report, to face higher impacts of climate change for all 6 categories that the report analyzed compared to all other demographic groups. For example, with a 2% Celsius, 3.6 Fahrenheit increase in global warming, it found that Black and African-American individuals are 34% more likely to currently live in areas with the highest projected increase in childhood asthma, and that this rises to 41% under 4% global warming. 40%, they were also 40% more likely to currently live in areas with the highest projected increases in extreme temperatures related to death, something that rises to 59% under 4% of global warming. And again, we think about some of our urban areas where we already have other equity issues at play, whether it's low access to green space, we have and heat island effect, all of these things being compounded by climate change and disproportionately affecting certain communities. When we think about Hispanics and Latinos, the report found that they have a high participation in weather exposed industries, such as construction and agriculture. And so that they were particularly vulnerable to the extreme temperatures that we are expecting to see more of in the years to come. With that 2% increase of global warming, Hispanic and Latino individuals were 43% more likely to currently live in areas with the highest projected reductions in labor hours due to extreme temperatures. Let's think about that. Low-income communities, people who rely on those jobs in the construction and agricultural sector, having less time to actually work. And if they're in the work, when we've already seen this happen in many places, even in both these fields, dying because of trying to make it through an extremely hot day to help their family have resilient livelihoods. And with regard to transportation, Hispanic and Latino individuals are about 50% more likely to currently live in areas with the highest estimated increase in traffic delays due to increased coastal flooding. Time is money. People are already, especially in urban areas, moving to peri-urban areas even further out to get to then just come back to the city for the jobs because they're being placed out of their original neighborhoods. And so the increased cost in transportation because of flooding absolutely affects workers across America, especially as this EPA study found Hispanic and Latino individuals. With these examples in mind, the emergency management community must understand how climate change impacts the profession. And this is going to require all of us to increase our own climate literacy as emergency managers and as communities so that we can help communities improve their own outcomes and long-term climate resilience. This will mean an increased shared understanding of climate risks and what impactful mitigation opportunities truly look like. We're going to have to shift our attention to smart investments in systems-based community-wide projects to protect those at most severe and persistent risk. Many communities are already facing aging infrastructure, which increases the risk of major disasters. We can be focused on the built environment and a structure, but then even the stormwater systems in a community can exacerbate flooding. And so the problem of aging infrastructure also is one that has its biases. There's more underinvestment in certain communities than others when it comes to infrastructure. As the frequency of these disasters accelerates, the agency must increase climate adaptations across the nation. I mentioned BRIC already briefly, but FEMA, and I want to share a few of the ways that we've already taken some steps in this regard. Through our hazard mitigation assistance, such as the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, we've prioritized innovative infrastructure projects. So for example, helping a community adopt and enforce disaster-resistant building codes can contribute to building the whole of communities' resilience. And so that's one of the things that we've lifted up in our BRIC program. Research shows that for every dollar invested in building to the latest codes and standards, you have $11 of future avoided loss. So a good investment for sure. So therefore, disaster resilient building codes is becoming part of FEMA's policies, our programs, our guidance, our communications, what we're trying to focus on in some of our partnerships. And this is certainly an area where we have a lot of different partners with state and local code officials and different associations, because it is so key to building a resilient nation. So that FEMA climate resilience investments move the nation closer to equity, the agency is also committed to using comprehensive risk and community data to ensure underserved and vulnerable communities are prioritized. We know that the mitigation projects are that investment that take into account future conditions. And this is a big shift. Oftentimes it was historical data that informed what needed to be done, but there's been that recognition and shift that future conditions need to be part of how we invest in mitigation to help communities be resilient for the long term. We are increasing the amount of direct technical assistance we do. This past year, we had about 8 communities in the who are part of BRIC receive the direct TA that I mentioned earlier. And we're looking to increase that to 20 this coming year and possibly 50 in the out years. And there's some very specific things that we're trying to support communities to do through this work. It's everything from figuring out how to apply to the assistance with understanding and completing applications, to the environmental planning and historic preservation requirements, to understanding social vulnerability, figuring out how to supporting communities with that engagement and participatory planning that's oftentimes needed. And so there's a lot of different ways where we're trying to ensure that the support we're providing is helpful. In the hazard mitigation grant program, we're working to influence equitable outcomes through our work with states and in federally recognized tribes, territorial partners, both during the planning process to assess risk associated with natural hazards, and then also for how those strategies lead to risk reduction. This past summer, President Biden approved more than almost $3.5 billion in HMGP funding to increase resilience due to the impacts of climate change nationwide. $3.5 billion already approved. This is a significant investment in our ability to reduce risk when it comes to natural hazards. And this is related to, it was part of the response with all the 59 major declarations due to the COVID pandemic. So you may be thinking about the pandemic in terms of the first response, the health response, how we help communities, but it also came with 59 declarations that included the ability to invest in mitigation. This funding is a tangible solution to help prevent future disasters. It allows us at FEMA to provide direct support to states, tribes, and territories, to complete the mitigation projects, to strengthen infrastructure, to identify those long-term solutions that are needed, and to make a real difference in communities. One of the key things I want to lift up to you, because of the way you're at the core of cross-sector partnerships, is that all of these projects, all of these investments are better when we do them together. When communities can rely on the technical expertise or philanthropic resources or best practices of other communities. And so as we look to both invest those HMGP dollars I mentioned, but even the infrastructure bill, $1 trillion in new money going into communities across the nation, it's going to be the partnerships that really enable communities to leverage these funds for something transformative. And as we've talked about already through this conference, transformative is what we need to really have the resilience our nation demands of us. Our third goal, third and final, is promoting and sustaining a ready FEMA and a prepared nation. As disasters become more frequent, severe, complex, the demands placed on all of emergency management has dramatically increased. Across our field, we've been asked to organize, coordinate, manage resources across so many different spectrums. Even at FEMA, we are helping with resettling Afghan refugees, to the pandemic, to a whole range of things that 5 years ago, people probably would not have anticipated. For example, as you all have talked about, the COVID pandemic has also pushed many of us into the public health sector in ways we haven't been involved in before, which for emergency management holds so many lessons and so many best practices to really bring those concepts of social determinants of health to emergency management. And beyond COVID, we're also seeing resources drawn into the opioid crisis, homelessness, and tackling the challenges with unhoused, social unrest, domestic terrorism, cybersecurity. There are just so many challenges that we are all facing that each have their unique strategies to combat and to reduce the risk. And then there's, of course, the climate change, which we already talked about, turning the storms, floods, and fires that we manage into profound long-term cascading incidents, one thing after another, that is just eroding the capacity of many communities to respond and respond and respond. At every level, emergency managers are taking on so many new roles, especially in these past few years. And the thing is, we are uniquely positioned to see the way our systems are stretched because we coordinate across those sectors. We are positioned to see the types of partnerships that are needed to support where our nation needs to go. In adapting to this trend of managing risks traditionally outside the roles of emergency management, we must broaden our approach to readiness and to national preparedness by increasing capabilities overall. And that's really what this pillar of the FEMA's plan for the next 5 years is focused on. It's looking at how we will, through our schoolhouses, what we'll do to advance emergency management professionals, through the curriculum for the federal government, through training, through education, through professional development, making sure that the resources we have available are available to people from across the nation. And so through these revised training initiatives, the agency is going to support a whole community comprehensive emergency management workforce approach so that we're together ready for events at every level. For instance, we've got through the Emergency Management Institute, EMI Anywhere, and the Center for Domestic Preparedness has been doing virtual trainings, and there are new partnerships with HBCUs to increase the diversity of the people who actually are attending some of these courses and the pathways into emergency management. And we're also looking to really improve the way we know what the standards are for how we help each other through the national qualification system. All of these things are things that are already in flight, but that require the collaboration of federal agencies, the private sector, social sectors, state, local, tribal, territorial governments, and other partners to truly put to work. So those are the three big pillars of the FEMA strategic plan. And now that I've covered what and shared with you where we're trying to go, because knowing what each other is trying to do, like I said at the beginning, is key to partnering with each other. I want to share what we think will be different at the end of those 5 years and in the field of emergency management. By instilling equity as a foundation of emergency management and striving to meet the unique needs of underserved communities, the emergency management community can work to break the cycles of disasters worsening pre-existing inequities and build a more resilient nation. Think about that. We can really, by doing this well, we can contribute to breaking those cycles of inequity. On the climate front, at the local level, communities face a multitude of hazards. So being able to support an all hazards approach in dealing with these different impacts of climate change in an integrated way will help make sure that every investment we make in resilience is one that's going to have a multiple benefit for the different range of hazards and chronic stresses and shocks that communities face. So maybe one thing you've picked up on so far is that we are really looking at our role differently. And I'm going to quote Gina McCarthy for a moment here, the White House National Climate Advisor, because I think she framed it well in terms of the pivot, the transition that we are in as a nation, as FEMA, to execute on our mission of serving people before, during, and after disasters. She said, FEMA is no longer looking at itself as just a response agency, but a true resilience agency. How we're looking at investing in resilience has expanded, is transforming, and is very much focused on the challenges and opportunities I outlined. And investing in readiness at all levels. Individual and community preparedness will be the name of the game for us as a society to be able to adapt and thrive to these climate-related events. This coordination provided direct support to the state of Louisiana. I'm going to give you a couple examples now to bring it home. The coordination provided direct support to the state. The example I wanted to share is that these things are already in flight. We've got partnerships that are already really embodying the future direction of where we want to go in emergency management. Earlier today in one of the panels, you all saw how there were some critical partnerships that came together after Hurricane Ida, where the Louisiana Business Emergency Operations Center worked with a broader network to include the Energy Marketers Association, the National Business Emergency Operations Center, and the Fuel Task Force, including DOE and FEMA. And they were focused on retail fuel availability and calibrating activities across the fuel supply. This coordination provided direct support to the state of Louisiana with EMA sourcing more than 75 organizations nationally to provide 160 fuel trucks from 16 states to support that response in Louisiana. The relationships cultivated ahead of the hurricane with all of those organizations and others, like the All Hazards Consortium, resulted in this operational impact. That same level of investing in our response apparatus and our partnerships for response are going to be what we need as we invest in our partnerships for a resilient nation. And while we're still managing the pandemic response, many of you are leaning into readiness already through your involvement in things like exercises and our national level exercise in 2022. And so I know there's folks from a lot of emergency management organizations on the call and other organizations. Many of you are probably already participating in many of these virtual exercises, given that virtual makes participation easier these days. But one of the things I wanted to lift up is that these types of events are already bringing people together across industry, government, sectors to tackle those issues of how we deal with extreme weather events. The scenario this year, as some of you may know, is around the Cascadia subduction zone and the fault line that goes across the Pacific coastal states. And by exercising these events, one of the things that I'm really excited that the teams are starting to do is connect exercises with the investments we need to make in resilience. As we exercise these things, what are those partnerships that weren't quite working in the exercise or that weren't there at all that we need to invest in and create and foster and nurture in the years to come so that we can really have those building blocks of resilience in place when we need them. So if any of you are wanting to participate that aren't already, I will make a plug for the national level exercise in Cascadia, and you can always be in touch with that team at the nle@femadhs.gov email address, because the more partners who play in the pre-disaster space, the more prepared we can become when we find out where we need to focus. Other things that are already going on. Efforts to build private and public partnerships and share best practices are already happening in full force in many ways. In fact, we have a guide that we have on our website at FEMA called Building Public-Private Partnerships that has lots of the recommendations and best practices specifically at the local level that can be leveraged to build community resilience. And I'm going to give you one example of a best practice, a case study in that guide, because there is such a treasure trove. So many of you may be familiar with the Resilient Nashua Initiative, which was formed in 2017. And through this initiative, it pulled the input of businesses, organizations to help develop the resilience strategies that improved emergency response and pre-disaster recovery planning. Those partnerships prioritize business and infrastructure for the city. And it really helped focus on how you boost and restore capacities and services post-disaster. And it resulted in Nashua being a city that is more resilient and has stronger relationships with local businesses. This is an example we see over and over again of when these partnerships come together pre-disaster, there's a huge benefit, both for the community as a whole at any point in time, and particularly when communities are in their moment of need. So I know that I have kind of gone over, and I am the last speaker of the day, I believe. So I'm going to wrap up here, but I wanted to just close by saying that over the last several years, this increase in disaster events is just the beginning, unfortunately. And it's going to be the partnerships that we make together that are the ones that bolster the capacity of the communities who need us most. And so taking this time before events to really invest in preparedness, invest in those partnerships, see how we draw each other's strengths is going to be the linchpin for us truly to invest in our nation's resilience. So thank you so much for inviting me to this incredible forum with so many cross-sector leaders. And I encourage you all to continue to take that cross-sector approach and proactively coordinate with each other, focus on collective efforts, and invest not just on critical infrastructure, but in the people that make up the communities we all serve. Thank you so much for having me today, Tom. Back to you, Laura.
Ms. Salinas, thank you so much. First of all, thank you for being our closing keynote. What a great way to close out day one of our summit. Thank you for sharing those 3 goals with us. And most importantly, thanks for your passion and what you do. It's very clear from the way you talk. So, and I hope you are seeing the comments coming through on the chat, or stick around for a minute to read those, because
I will read them and answer them. I can't yet speak and answer at the same time. I will work on that skill.
Yeah, no, it's just some great feedback, and people really appreciating you being here. So thank you so much for that.